Excited to continue our journey today in studying the Sefer HaChinuch, on the Taryag Mitzvot, the 613 Mitzvot. And on the first mitzvah, we studied about Peru Urvu, to be fruitful and multiply. Our second mitzvah, we looked at Brit Milah yesterday. And today, in Parshat Vayishlach, still in the book of Genesis, we look at the Hanasheh. So it's actually a fascinating context. The formative moments of the creation of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, at least our name Yisrael. So if we look, read together here in Bereshit, in Genesis chapter 32, verse 25. Yaakov was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. Right? He's preparing to meet his brother Esav, his estranged brother, and he wrestles with this person until the break of dawn. When he perceived that he could not overcome him, he struck the socket of his hip. So Jacob's hip socket was dislocated as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn has broken." And he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me," Yaakov says. He said to him, "What is your name?" He replies, "Yaakov," Jacob. He said, "No longer will it be said that your name is Yaakov, but Yisrael. For you have striven with the divine and with man and have overcome." Then Yaakov inquired and he said, "Divulge, if you please, your name." And he said, "Why then do you inquire of my name?" And he blessed him there. So Yaakov called the name of the place Peniel, for I've seen the divine face to face, yet my life was spared. The sun rose for him as he passed Penuel, and he was limping on his hip. And here's the mitzvah. Therefore, the children of Israel, Bnei Yisrael, are not to eat the displaced sinew on the hip socket to this day, because he struck Yaakov's hip socket on the displaced sinew. Fascinating. Yaakov is anxious to encounter his estranged brother, and he wrestles through the night, and his wrestling partner can't get away. So he gives him a cheap shot in the Hanasheh. And because of this place, the sinew that's hit, we now see a mitzvat lo taseh. Mitzvat lo taseh, not to eat the sinew of the thigh vein. How fascinating that from this powerful narrative, we move to a prohibition on food consumption. Now, just to understand what the sciatic nerve is, and here I'm going to read from a short paragraph online. The sciatic nerve is a large nerve in humans and other animals. It begins in the lower back and runs through one's bottom and down the lower limb. It's the longest and widest single nerve in the human body, going from the top of the leg to the foot on the posterior aspect. The sciatic nerve provides the connection to the nervous system for nearly the whole of the skin of the leg, the muscles of the back of the thigh, and those of the leg and the foot. So this is a crucial part of the human and animal body and our nervous system. And Yaakov limps after being struck there. And this word Hanasheh is really connected to a Hebrew root to forget. And Yosef names his son Menashe, right? Like Nashe is Menashe. That we shouldn't forget this struggle of Yisrael that he had, that was so formative for Klal Yisrael, for the Jewish people, that we got our name Yisrael to remind us that we are not a dogmatic people of submission, but rather we are a people of questioning, a people of struggle. We are Yisrael, a people who wrestle through the night. So who is this that Yaakov's struggling with? Rashi, quoting the famous Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah 77:3, tells us that this person he's wrestling with is an angel, and it's the prince of Esav. It's an angel representing his brother. Is he wrestling with a person, with angel, with God, or perhaps with himself? The Zohar in 170b describes Yaakov's battle through the night with this angel as symbolic with a person's struggle of their own darker side, right? That each of us needs to confront our shadow side and wrestle with that consistently to overcome, struggling with ourself, struggling with our own trauma, our own weaknesses, our own challenges, struggling with our identity and with our ethics and our spiritual connection. So don't forget the struggle. But what is it? Don't forget what? What is it we are to remember? Because the problem is, if we were all butchers, like in the olden days, right, then we'd be in touch with removing the sciatic nerve when one was preparing kosher meat. But today we're very removed from factory farming. We're very removed from the production of kosher meat. We don't see the removal of the sciatic nerve. So it's true. We shouldn't, whenever someone buys kosher meat, they know there's not going to be sciatic nerve in there. It's going to be removed. But how do we ensure we have the reminder? We have this reminder of this mitzvah, of what it means to be Yisrael. So a few things we can take away as reminders to instill in our lives from this, since we're removed from that. The first is we learn in the Talmudic tractate Chulin 94b, that there's a prohibition of genevat dat, deceiving another one. And we learn here that even if meat that had a gid Hanasheh in it, you may not sell that to a Gentile without disclosing the fact that it has gid Hanasheh in there, even though they wouldn't keep kosher the way observant Jews would. Still, there is deception. So there's an element here reminding us that there's hidden elements to our conversation, to the marketplace, and to continue to be honest about the dimensions that can't be seen, right? Like the gid Hanasheh that you can't tell, you can't discover on your own if it's present there. It has to go on honesty. The second is to learn about the battle itself. That the malach, the angel, can't defeat Yaakov. So he really gives him a cheap shot. He gives him a cheap shot in the back of the thigh there. And I think this is a reminder about being fair and being just. And the truth is, even in competition, and certainly even in warfare, or with those who we dislike and distrust, that the honesty of that engagement, of being charitable, where possible, even with those we disagree with, and not to hit them below the belt. Yisrael, Yaakov, continues to limp because of that cheap shot. The next, which I think is quite profound actually, is that the gid Hanasheh is quite fascinating. That this third mitzvah, we're already dealing with kashrut, we're already dealing with food ethics, right? Actually, the first commandment in the whole Torah, not within this 613, is itself about food. Right? In the Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, that we may not eat the forbidden fruit. To teach us that, and when they eat this forbidden fruit, they become conscious of the Eitz Hadat, Tov V'Ra. Right? The moral consciousness is born in the first act of food consumption. That's the human birth of moral consciousness. Now, the Jewish ethical consciousness is born here. Yisrael wrestles through the night. And through the night, he gets struck. And that reminds us of who we are, a people who are struggling. And it immediately is extended by the Torah into food ethics, right? Be aware of what you eat. Be aware of what you eat. And when you are aware of what you eat, it reminds you that you're Yisrael. And when you're Yisrael, you have a mission in the world to be an ambassador for Kedusha, for holiness, and for Tzedek and Mishpat and Chesed, for justice and for kindness and for Emet, for truth and for Shalom, and all the other virtues. And so this is the power of eating, that we can think of Yaakov wrestling through the night when we also eat. So one more thing from the Chinuch here around the purpose of this. The Sefer Chinuch writes, at the root of this precept lies the purpose that Jewry should have a hint that even though they will endure great tribulations in the exiles at the hands of the nations and the descendants of Esav, they should remain assured that they will not perish, but their progeny and name will endure forever, and a Redeemer will come and deliver them from the oppressor's hand. Remembering this matter always through the precept, which will serve as a reminder, they will stand firm in their faith and righteousness forever. Ha-mitzvah shetiyeh lezikaron ya'amdu be'emunatam u'tzidkatam le'yolam. That we learn that we should remain, even in the darkness of night, faithful and committed to our core moral principles, And that the Gid Hanasheh is a reminder. The mitzvah itself is a reminder of the eternity of Klal Yisrael, that we will survive even in the darkest times. As a side point, there's a fascinating discussion about what it means to have mitzvot that emerge pre-Sinai, right? Before Sinai, because we're learning these mitzvot right now in the book of Genesis. And what the Rambam says in his commentary on the final Mishnah in the 7th chapter of Masechet Chulin, he writes, the reason why we do not eat ever min hachai, right, meat taken from a live animal, is not because the Almighty forbade Noah, but rather because Moshe forbade ever min hachai upon us by commanding it at Sinai, that the prohibition of ever min hachai remains in force because of Sinai. Similarly, we do not circumcise because Abraham circumcised himself and his household, but rather because the Almighty commanded us through Moshe that we should be circumcised, just as Abraham was circumcised. The same applies to Gid Hanasheh, the Rambam writes, this prohibition against eating the sciatic nerve. We do not follow the prohibition issued to Yaakov, but rather the command to Moshe. So those interested in the halachic thought, it's true that the mitzvot get their force from Sinai and from the later Talmudic process, but we can still find deep meaning in the stories. And in fact, here at the Gid Hanasheh, it would make no sense. The prohibition would make no sense without looking at the inspiring story in Genesis, with this wrestling through the night and being struck in this area, in this thigh, that we have this prohibition. So I encourage us all that we, when we're having dark moments, that we touch our leg, we grab our leg, we grab our thigh, right? We think of the sciatic nerve inside of us and get strength from that, get perseverance from that. That when it looks dark for Klal Yisrael, that we're reminded that the Jewish people will survive, that we have a mission in the world to do, even when at times we may be limping. And for us personally as well, that when it feels dark in the night, to remember that the sun will rise. The sun will rise. That even in the darkest moments of our lives, it will once again get brighter. And so we grab our leg to give us hope, to give us the perseverance, the resilience, the grit, to keep going to do our work in the world. That just as Yaakov became Yisrael, and we can rely upon that holy moment, that so too we can remember that every struggle in our lives is a nisayon, it's a test, it's a challenge. And every challenge is a spiritual opportunity to actualize our character, to perfect our inner being, to bring light into our lives and to fulfill our avoda, to actualize our service in the world. May we all be zocha. Wishing much bracha and hatzlacha.